We really are. Man, that news really got me, Al. Wow.
Yeah,
that was so crappy.
Trans murder right in the middle of transgender awareness. We're going to break in with headline news on that.
Awesome.
And you're with Flockfest. Tell me a little bit about Flockfest.
So we have an annual beach party and we raise funds for other charities. So we're a nonprofit that supports other nonprofits.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen all your balloons. Were you one of the people that was a flamingo in Pride Fort Lauderdale?
Yes, and Pride in Wilton Manors.
Yeah, that was the gayest thing I've ever seen.
It's pretty gay.
That was pretty gay.
Especially the guy in the spiked heels.
That was Al.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to Queer News Tonight, the world's first and only LGBTQ evening news. It's time to queer up the news. We begin tonight with breaking Q news. A well-known Miami trans woman has been murdered in the middle of Transgender Awareness Week and on the eve of Transgender Day of Remembrance. A well-known trans woman in South Florida has been murdered. A man is behind bars after police say he stabbed and killed his wife, an important and well-known transgender woman in Miami's LGBTQ community. Her friends identified her as Yoneski Carey Hernandez. She was a pageant title holder and an important person in the LGBTQ community, being the first woman historically ever to change her Cuban passport to match her female identity. According to an arrest report, 28-year-old Igor Araduzoza called police to his downtown Miami high-rise at around 4:25 a.m. on Tuesday morning, stating that he had stabbed his wife. When police arrived, they said Araduzoza spontaneously mentioned that meth had screwed up his life and once again admitted to stabbing her. Investigators found a woman lying on the floor covered in blood and suffered from stab wounds. Charges have not yet been filed. This news is striking as America brings attention to the trans community this week in an awareness week and this week's Transgender Day of Remembrance. Reports indicate that 2020 has been the deadliest year in history for violence and murder in the trans community, especially for trans women of color. The World Health Organization reports that more than 330 trans have been murdered in 2020, in the greatest number in history. Tonight, we begin by honoring Transgender Day of Remembrance, and in the big finish, discuss Spike Lee directs a musical about Viagra. You can't make this stuff up.
And we learn about the Pornhub Awards. Yes, the Pornhub Awards. Yes, you know what it's all about, right? And in the big finish, Giuliani returns to the courtroom after 30 years and embarrasses real attorneys.
We consider if homo attack ads worked in this election, and in the big finish, we watch what happens when a shark takes on a dog. Spoiler alert, the winner may surprise you.
So good evening, LGBTQ world. It's 7 p.m. Wednesday, November 18th, and we are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight. The world's first live daily queer evening news show, Out of the Closet and Into the Headlines on Q News Tonight. Well, thank you for joining Queer News Tonight. This is an unedited live LGBTQ evening news show. Whatever happens, you're going to see it. This evening, we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ community from South Florida, America, and across the world. I'm your Queer News Tonight anchor, Al Ferguson. Tonight, let's welcome anchor Faye. What? She's out, she's proud, and believe me, I know she's certainly loud.
Not that loud.
Yeah, that loud. She's a Latina to be reckoned with, half Puerto Rican, half Colombian, and 100% freaking New Jersey. She has the popular blog and YouTube channel, Faye What? Welcome, Faye.
Hola, mi gente. So happy to be here.
And next, let's welcome anchor Ryan Young, a fundraiser, community relations supporter, and board member of Flockfest Events. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, Al. Thanks for having me.
Well, tonight we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Wednesday, November 18th. Let's begin by queering up gay culture, celebrating Transgender Day of Remembrance. Watch this.
Stigma and discrimination against trans people remain a global reality. Trans people are victims and survivors of horrifying hate violence. Harassment, isolation, and exclusion have serious impacts on mental and physical well-being. Laws and policies support the criminalization of the most marginalized of us, the homeless, the poor, sex workers, people of color, those without documents. Worldwide, there are many trans groups fighting for the rights of trans people, but political contexts and persecution often limit access to data. Together, we will continue fighting until we are all safe.
The LGBTQ community is celebrating Transgender Awareness Week, and November 20 is Transgender Day of Remembrance. Charles Dickens wrote, quote, "This is the best of times, this is the worst of times." That could apply to the T in the LGBTQ community. The best of times is growing awareness of trans needs in our LGBTQ community and the broader community at large. The best of times is a president-elect that has made our community and trans a key component of Biden's platform and even in his acceptance speeches. But the worst of times is how we still treat the trans community, especially in terms of discrimination, phobia, and even violence. Queer News Tonight has reported in so many stories in the trans community in 2020. The worst of times is our reporting that 2020 has the greatest amount of violence and murders against trans, especially trans women of color, ever before in history. This year, worldwide, more than 330 have been murdered. A terrible record. Civil rights are human rights, and we celebrate this week, and especially the Transgender Day of Remembrance. We remind our community these steps you can take to become an ally to the transgender community starting this week. 1. Respect pronouns. It's more polite to ask which pronouns a person uses rather than to assume and misgender a person. 2. Learn the basics. Transgender people are assigned a gender at birth that does not align with how they feel about themselves. 3. Be empathetic. Transgender people face extremely high rates of violence and discrimination. Suicide, murder, and rape haunt the community, and many trans people lose their friends and family while transitioning. 4. Don't out your trans friends. Unless your friend explicitly says it's okay to tell others, don't out them. The act of outing a transgender person can endanger their family relationships, living situations, jobs, and lives. Outing a trans person is unnecessary and dangerous. 5. Don't fantasize transgender people. Transgender folks are humans and not kinks. 6. Avoid misgendering and dead naming. It's important to use the gender and the name of a trans person that they prefer, even when you're talking about them in past. 7. Educate yourself and others. Tolerance goes hand in hand with awareness. It is so important for all of us to educate ourselves, our friends, and our families about transgender identities. And 8. Donate to or help out trans organizations and groups, giving money and time to groups whose mission it is to fight for equal rights and protections for the trans community. It is one of the best ways to be an ally. Some good groups out there to help include the National Center for Transgender Equality, Trans Lifeline, the Transgender Law Center, Gleason, and the Trevor Project. The tips above will help you begin your journey to being an awesome trans ally. But please don't stop it yourself. Share this with your friends and family, cis or trans, and help make the world safer and more welcoming for our trans brothers and sisters. That is how we celebrate our trans community this week.
Wow, so many good tips, Al. You know, they may sound simplistic to some, but I mean, education is everything about, I mean, this week, today, we just lost somebody. And wow, a lot of the LGBTQ community is mourning Uni's death. And education is so important. It's just so important. I mean, I can't say enough of that.
Totally agree, Faye. And it just reminds me, I always say to people, a little bit of compassion goes a long way.
You know, as I was preparing this story, I realized, as frequently referred to as kind of the privileged white gay guy, I have participated in many of these points in my life that I shouldn't have. And my 2 years here in South Florida has been evolutionary in me re-educating and having people spend the time to help educate me on the importance of how to approach transgender people and the trans community. And I'm trying to make those changes myself.
Absolutely.
It's time to queer up South Florida. Announcing the Outshine LGBTQ Film Festival Fort Lauderdale Virtual Edition, December 3rd through the 6th. Watch this. Happening Out Television and Queer News Tonight are the digital television sponsor of some of the nation's most important charity and LGBTQ events. We are pleased to announce we will sponsor the 12th edition of the Outshine LGBTQ Film Festival Fort Lauderdale, a biannual film festival whose mission is to unite the community through social events and LGBTQ plus media that inspire, entertain, and educate audiences. Outshine is going virtual December 3rd through the 6th, showcasing 21 world-class films from 11 countries. We will bring you interesting content in the coming weeks, so stay tuned.
Queer Up Entertainment. Randy Rainbow skewers Kayleigh McEnany's denial over Trump's loss. Finally wading back into the fray following the drawn-out results of election 2020, comedian Randy Rainbow has dropped his newest video, a lampooning of White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany and her refusal, as well as her bosses, to admit that Donald Trump lost the election. Rainbow uses some Sondheim melody from the musical company for his basis. Thus does the song Getting Married Today become Not Reelected Today. The accompanying video sees Rainbow channeling his inner choir boy and donning a stringy wig to impersonate McEnany. Everyone at Queer News Tonight continues to love the Rainbow.
Next, let's queer up entertainment. Pornhub announced its 2020 awards nominees and presenters. It's that time again, the time that everyone waits for. Yes, you guessed it, the nominations for the now annual Pornhub Awards are out. And as expected, those names are pretty hot. The Pornhub Awards is the only porn award show that's entirely data-driven. The platform uses algorithms, science, to track searches and views. So it's you, the fans, and your actual habits that get to pick the winners. And if your habits don't line up, right? Don't necessarily line up with your stated favorites. There's a whole selection of fan-selected categories that you can do that help sway the numbers on instead. And we're talking big numbers. It would come as no surprise that Pornhub has more than 5 billion views in 2020. Yeah, let's blame it on COVID-19. This year's award show will be December 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern and will be entirely digital given the pandemic. The show will be live streamed so fans around the world can watch and enjoy. Guest presenters and performers include legendary filmmaker John Waters, Violet Chachki, and many more. Waters, for one, is proud to take part, saying to Page 6, quote, "Good filth on demand is what we all need to stay home and be sexually safe and socially distanced in this obscene pandemic. Giving a Pornhub award seems like a civic duty to me," end quote. Love the joke. It seems as if Pornhub has all the bases covered: gay, lesbian, trans, every fetish imaginable. By the way, y'all, and I'm letting the producers know tonight, I'm not available to do Q News Tonight on December 15th.
Oh, we figured that out. We figured you'd be glued to your laptops. Listen, Pornhub, oh, thank you so much for all the years of free porn, all those lonely nights that you helped me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will be watching for sure. I have friends that like are into feet, and they'll be watching for that section. I wish I was kidding with you guys.
They have that fetish in the awards.
Yeah, I don't really watch porn, so I can fill in for you.
What?
I'll help out.
What?
Yeah.
He's so lying.
Ryan's new to
I like the real things. though.
Yeah, Ryan's new to queer news. We'll explore this in the coming months. I assure you, we'll explore it.
Next up, let's queer up gay culture. Ivan the Wonderful presents his 2021 calendar. Yes, finally we get to celebrate an end to horrible 2020 and look forward to a magical new 2021. At Queer News Tonight, we have been reporting that much of our joy for next year is first being experienced through LGBTQ calendars. So we were thrilled when Ivan the Wonderful announced Watercolors. This sweet and talented Russian artist, Ivan Bulbankov, has debuted a wonderful series that positions between the Sugar Polite and Tom of Finland. His new watercolors is filled with month after month of beautiful masculine images that is exactly what the LGBTQ community orders for Christmas presents and to put an end to the misery of 2020 and the celebration of 2021.
Queer up the vote. Do homophobic attack ads work? It's complicated. LGBTQ candidates once again made history in terms of the overall number elected to Congress and the state legislatures across the country. However, many of them had to contend with homophobic and transphobic attack ads this election cycle. Anise Parker, president of the LGBTQ Victory Fund, said, quote, "There is little doubt that millions of dollars in homophobic and transphobic attack ads devastated our candidates in key swing states during the final weeks of their campaigns. Bigoted politicians and operatives who thrive in the politics of hate were able to peel away support from voters who don't yet know our community. Bigoted ads did not spell defeat for all LGBTQ candidates they targeted, but even the candidates who overcame the attacks did have to invest resources to respond to them. Professor Gabriel Magni of Loyola Marymount University says, quote, "When it comes to homophobic and transphobic political attacks, it is hard to quantify the effects. When you have an incumbent president who is such a polarizing figure, it becomes harder to disentangle what is the effect of homophobic attack ads and what is the effect of having Donald Trump on the ballot. Homophobic and transphobic attacks produced mixed impacts on congressional races, with non-incumbents and those in purple districts most likely to suffer defeat. It seems clear 2020 created a new political enemy for the LGBTQ community. While the American community overwhelmingly supports the LGBTQ rights, this new type of homophobic attack ad is designed to influence a small number of voters that change the 50-50 environment that we are in. Experts suggest that we must find a scalpel to deal with this new strategy and our sledgehammer acceptance. Strategy will not."
Interesting in that so much money is being spent when overwhelmingly the American public supports LGBTQ rights and the defense of our rights. But this is a highly technical, very efficient attack, and an attack ad designed to only affect 2 or 3% of the population in the city, the district, etc., that they're going after, because that's all they're looking for, is that 2 to 3%. And they had some success in this election cycle with that.
Well, let's not forget that Mr. Cheeto got 72+ million people to vote for him, right? And so 2020 didn't create this hate against us. He just made it okay, you know?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I was happy with the outcome, but the number of votes that he still did get was honestly kind of shocking to me. I was shocked. But I think for some people, it's also a matter of getting used to the idea of not only having LGBTQ rights, but having LGBTQ people in leadership positions. Yeah. So I think some people, that's where they may flip more easily.
Yes, it's Mayor Pete becoming cabinet member Pete.
Exactly.
That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Well, that is our queer headlines for today. Next, let's catch up on the LGBTQ news surrounding COVID-19 with our special segment we call Quarantine Quickies. We are reporting tonight today's LGBTQ COVID-19 cases and deaths, both in the United States and worldwide. Quarantine Quickies. COVID catastrophe is growing for the LGBTQ community, while vaccine approval may be just days away. Watch this.
Pandemic fatigue has set in, and America has collectively stopped caring just in time for the holiday season. What do you think are the implications, though, if Americans decide to go with some form of business as usual as the Thanksgiving holiday unfolds next week?
Yeah, so the things that people have to understand is that we have more virus across America now than we've ever had during this pandemic. It's really out of control. And most of the spread is happening when people don't have symptoms.
This morning, Pfizer just out with what seems to be the last piece of the puzzle before it can seek emergency use approval for its vaccine from the FDA.
This is really hopeful, right? This is great news. Both Moderna and Pfizer now at about 95% effectiveness. That's fabulous. It's going to make an enormous difference in the pandemic. Obviously, they have to go through FDA approval. We have to look at the full set of data. There are lots of caveats, but I don't think we should lose sight of the good news here. The challenge now will be getting these vaccines out relatively quickly and effectively across our nation, and there's a lot of work to be done to make that happen.
Well, Pfizer announced today that the approval of their new vaccine from the FDA is likely only days away. While this is tremendous news for the LGBTQ community, they warn it will require tremendous cooperation in making it effective in our LGBTQ community. The delivery system and logistics will now be far more important than the vaccine itself. The distribution system, aided by the Fed's Operation Warp Speed, hopes to have millions of doses administered before the end of the year. With a 95% effectiveness, it will certainly begin to have dramatic effects as we close this terrible year of pandemic and prepare for a more optimistic 2021. Moderna has now also reported a vaccine of their own that is also showing a 95% effectiveness rate. This news could not come at a more important time as America is beyond code red for cases, hospitalizations, and deaths from the COVID-19 coronavirus. Health experts predict we will shortly be at 200,000 new infections a day. Today, in just 9 months, America crossed 250,000 pandemic deaths. Well, that is the COVID news for tonight. Next, we report that Happening Out Television Network is proud to be partnering book fair, part of Miami's commitment to expanding and strengthening Miami's literary culture. This year, the fair is a little different from their first online book fair in 36 years. Miami Book Fair Online will be streaming over 300 plus authors, including stories and poetry from around the world. Throughout the week, across our Happening Out Television Network platforms, we will be hosting a series of interviews live with their select authors from their LGBTQ author series. And tonight, we are pleased to welcome the poet, Roy G. Guzman. He is a Honduran poet raised in Miami, Florida, and is a recipient of the 2019 grant from the National Endowment of Arts, was the recipient of the Scribe for Human Rights Fellowship, focusing on issues affecting migrant farm workers in Minnesota, and after the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando, their poem, Restored Mural for Orlando, was turned into a chapbook with the help of poet and visual artist Dee Allen to raise funds for the victims. In this breathtaking debut collection, and a name for the people of Honduras, in the name of the people of Honduras, it is a term of solidarity and resilience. In these unflinching, riveting poems, Roy Guzman reaches across borders, between life and death, and between countries, invoking the voices of the lost. Part of the imagination narrative, part eulogy, and part queer coming-of-age story, the new book finds its own religion in fantastic figures such as the X-Men and pop singers and queer Ordactyl, which is imagined in the poems. So please welcome to Queer News Tonight, poet Roy G. Guzman. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, tell us about your participation in the Miami Book Fair and what it means for you in terms of the promotion of, this is a book, or tell us also about what you are showcasing in the book fair.
Yes. Yeah, it's a poetry collection. It's my debut poetry collection. And in terms of my relationship to the Miami Book Fair, I currently live in Minneapolis, but I was raised in Miami. Currently, my family lives in Kendall, and yeah, I used to attend all the time. And this year, originally I was supposed to be there in person, and with COVID, everything has moved online.
Have you ever done a digital book fair before? Is this the first time, or is this something you're used to?
I think this is the very first time. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And tell us about the poetry, especially the focus of what you did following Pulse.
Absolutely. So that poem ends up, it became a chapbook. We ended up raising funds for the victims. And this was back in 2016. The poem itself appears in the center of the book. And I had thought about, leaving the poem out, or, why should I include it in the book? And to me, it's so much tied to growing up in Florida and taking trips to Orlando, and what Orlando meant to me as a queer person growing up. So yeah, it was a very tragic event that I didn't know I would be able to write about. It took me about 3 or 4 days to have this poem written, and it's almost like I went through all the stages of grief so quickly. And I needed to get these words out there, especially because the people given platforms at the time were straight people.
It's a hardbound poetry book, softbound.
It's softbound. Yep, you can see it here.
Okay.
You like it soft.
Okay.
Like soft.
And pronounce it for us. Older white guy, difficulty. Pronounce it for us.
Catrachos.
Catrachos. Okay.
Yes,
and,
catrachos.
And what will you be doing in the Miami Book Fair online? Tell us about that.
Yep. So one of the people who blurred the book is Eduardo C. Corral, and Corral is a Chicanx and just a beautiful, beautiful, exquisite poet from the sort of the Southwest area, and he writes a lot about queerness, and we'll be in conversation about that. And he has the second book. This is my first book, and he not only blurred my book, but his work is the kind of work that I learn a lot from growing up.
Interesting. And the LGBTQ focus in the Miami Book Fair, people all over the country are watching you now in this interview. Is your experience that is common in book fairs or book conferences, exhibitions? Is LGBTQ literature a popular feature section in events like we're seeing in Miami?
Yep, it's marginalized out there in terms of the literary industry, the market. When it comes to the Miami Book Fair, I don't recall meeting many queer writers, specifically queer writers of color, growing up. I think that so much of the programming, at least in the last decade, has basically been in tune with the times, and how much there's been not just a need for representation, but the fact that many of these books and many of these authors are actually quite successful, and they're able to, they've been writing books that transcend not just genres, but transcend the people who read them as well.
And Roy, our LGBTQ community that wants to get your book, how do they get it from you?
Yes, so Catrachos was published by Grey Wolf Press. You can order it through any of your local bookstores. It's so important to support local bookstores, especially in this pandemic. But yeah, you can check it out through greywolfpress.org. Yeah, and there's more information about me in the book there.
Excellent. Well, Roy, we thank you for being with us tonight, and to all of our audience, we remind you there are so many different events going on in the Miami Book Fair. It's a good example of something that is new in 2020 forced upon us because of COVID-19, but it gives many more people the opportunity to meet you and hear your voice and read your poetry through this book. So we encourage you to check this out. It'll run actually all the way through the end of the year. The fair has begun, but you actually can participate digitally online all the way through the end of the year. So Roy, thank you very much for being with Queer News Tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Next, we report tonight that Happening Out Television Network helps support our LGBT community in many different ways. An example is Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church here in Fort Lauderdale. We are broadcasting from our permanent set in supporting that partnership. The network broadcasts the largest LGBTQ religious broadcast in the world, with more than 30,000 watching every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and it's totally live. We encourage you to tune in. Our campaign of sponsorship proudly supports Sunshine Cathedral is my queer church. Watch this.
Federation. I'm the board chair of the Sunshine Cathedral.
Hi, I'm Tom Federation. I'm the treasurer of the Sunshine Cathedral Foundation board.
And Sunshine Cathedral is our queer church.
And we'd also like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living, here in Fort Lauderdale for making this set and this amazing queer church campus possible.
Finally, we thank Queer News Tonight's hotel sponsor, Best Western I-95 Fort Lauderdale. This is the closest and best choice to the famous Wilton Drive, and our hosts and guests stay at this LGBT ally partner all the time. We encourage you to stay here when visiting South Florida.
Well, now it's time to end tonight's broadcast with what we call the Big Finish. These are today's silly or news that entertains the LGBTQ community. Here we go. The Big Finish. Paws versus Jaws. A dog jumps into the water to scare off a shark in Fort Lauderdale. We're showing this to you. And off the shark goes. Oh my God. What do you think, Faye?
How did my dog end up in Australia? Somebody get my dog back. Hell yeah, woohoo!
He has to think it's a dolphin. I can't imagine he would have done that knowing it's a shark.
The dog thought it was a dolphin. Okay, all right, I got you. I think it's absolutely hilarious because if you remember, in 1976, Jaws, one of the things that was lost was the dog, remember? So this one gets revenge. The Big Finish. Spike Lee is going to direct a musical about, wait, Viagra?
Are you serious?
Really?
Huh.
Are you serious? It's all about the blue pill, baby.
This is not something you're very interested in, is it, Faye?
No! Why the heck would I need that? Whenever we use anything that's in the shape of a penis, it stays exactly how it comes to us.
Right, and it goes
you don't
back
even
in
have
a
to
drawer.
feed it, give it wine or anything.
Well, that would make a very interesting. Oh, well, maybe it would. Any other thoughts on?
I just wonder, is he in it? Is he
He's
starring?
No, he's directing it.
Okay. Who's starring, I wonder?
I don't know. I just
Wait
heard
to
about
find
this
out.
today in The Big Finish.
Wow.
All right, in The Big Finish, Giuliani returns to courtroom. Have you heard? Yesterday. After 30 years. He had not been in a courtroom in 30 years. And he badly embarrassed himself to real attorneys. What do you think?
Oh, I can't stand this man. Just looking at his big ass head just like gets me in a bad place, Al. Seriously.
I
need
love
to
his
eat
hunched
pizza.
shoulders.
He's just such a
But
mess.
I'm happy that he embarrassed himself. Is that right to say? Not really, but.
No, but it's accurate.
It's days of countdown. When we're 62 days away, if he lasts through the 62 days, although he may not, because also in addition to embarrassing himself yesterday in the courtroom, we found out this morning that he's being paid $20,000 a day. And if there's anything that I know about Donald Trump, he's cheap. So Giuliani might not be with us as long as we think.
Next on
Let's
the
hope.
chopping block.
Let's hope.
Well, that is today's news for the LGBTQ community on the world's first and only daily LGBTQ evening news show. Is our community important to you?
Then help us by liking and subscribing. Ring the bell, updates, share this news. We are the only television live video news that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of anchors Faye What and Ryan Young, Ryan's first night, Ryan, you did a great
He
job.
did great.
And great job, and
Thank you.
Faye and I can't wait to have you back, and
thank you.
Lord, our gloves are going to be coming off, I'm just telling you. We're going to see you daily and tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Good night, America.
Good night.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Faye.